The trouble started at the Copacabana in May 1960. Sammy Davis Jr. was performing his regular engagement, and sitting in the front row was May Britt, a stunning Swedish actress who'd starred in The Young Lions alongside Marlon Brando. Sammy and May had been secretly dating for months, keeping it quiet because they both knew the relationship would create problems. In 1960, interracial marriage was still illegal in many states. The public wasn't ready for a black entertainer dating a white actress. Hollywood wasn't ready, and most importantly, Harlem wasn't ready. Bumpy Johnson heard about the relationship through his network. Bumpy controlled most of Harlem's entertainment venues, and Sammy was one of his biggest draws at the Apollo Theater. Bumpy had nothing against May Britt personally, but he understood politics. A black man dating a white woman in 1960 brought unwanted attention. It angered black nationalist groups who saw it as a betrayal. It angered white racists who saw it as an abomination. And attention meant police scrutiny, which was bad for Bumpy's various illegal enterprises. Bumpy sent word to Sammy through intermediaries, and the relationship, or there would be consequences. Sammy, being Sammy, refused. He loved May, and he wasn't going to let Bumpy Johnson or anyone else tell him who he could love. Sammy told Frank and Dean about Bumpy's threats. Frank immediately wanted to intervene, to use his mob connections to protect Sammy. But Dean urged caution. Let's not escalate this. Maybe it'll blow over. It didn't blow over. On June the 3rd, 1960, Sammy was walking back to his hotel after a late dinner when a black sedan pulled up beside him. 3 men got out. They weren't violent, didn't need to be. One of them simply said, "Mr. Johnson wants to talk to you." Sammy knew better than to refuse. He got in the car. When Sammy didn't show up for his Apollo performance the next evening, Frank panicked. He called Sammy's hotel. No answer. He called the theater. They hadn't seen him. He called May Britt. She was hysterical. She'd been trying to reach Sammy all day. Frank immediately suspected foul play. He started making calls to his contacts in law enforcement and the media, threatening to turn Sammy's disappearance into a national scandal. The NYPD quietly told Frank what they knew. Bumpy Johnson had Sammy. Where? Frank demanded. They wouldn't say, or couldn't. Bumpy's operations were spread throughout Harlem, and finding one person in Bumpy's network was nearly impossible unless Bumpy wanted you found. Dean Martin was in Los Angeles when he heard about Sammy's disappearance. He immediately flew to New York. When he arrived at Frank's suite at the Waldorf Astoria, Frank was on the phone screaming at someone about FBI jurisdiction. "Dean, Sammy's been kidnapped by Bumpy Johnson. We need to get him back now." "Frank," Dean said calmly, "hang up the phone." "Not now, Dean." "I'm trying to." Dean walked over and pressed the disconnect button on Frank's phone. Frank stared at him in fury. "What the hell are you doing? You're about to start a war that's going to get Sammy killed," Dean said. "Sit down and listen to me." Frank reluctantly sat. Dean continued. "Bumpy took Sammy to make a point. He's not going to kill him. Sammy's too valuable. But if you bring the FBI into Harlem, if you get the Chicago mob involved, Bumpy has no choice but to respond. And when criminals respond, people die. So what do you suggest?" Frank snapped. "We just wait?" "No," Dean said. "We negotiate." "With Bumpy?" Frank was incredulous. "The man kidnapped Sammy because Sammy's dating May Britt and Bumpy thinks it's bad for business. This isn't about violence, it's about control. Bumpy wants to show he still runs Harlem, so we give him a way to save face while getting Sammy back." Frank shook his head. "You're insane if you think you can negotiate with Bumpy Johnson." "I've done it before," Dean reminded him. "Remember the Copa in '58? That worked out fine. That was different. You were negotiating about money. This is personal. Everything with Bumpy is business, Dean said, even the personal stuff. He took Sammy to protect his operation. If we can show him there's a better way to handle this, he'll listen. And if he doesn't, then we try it your way, Dean said. But let me try first. Against his better judgment, Frank agreed. Dean made a call to Bumpy Johnson's office at the Lenox Lounge. The man who answered was polite but firm. "Mr. Johnson isn't available. Tell him Dean Martin wants to talk about Sammy Davis Jr." There was a long pause. "Hold, please." 5 minutes later, Bumpy Johnson himself came onto the line. "Dean Martin. I wondered when you'd call." "Mr. Johnson," Dean said respectfully, "I think we have a situation that needs resolving. Your friend stepped out of line. He needed to be educated." "I understand your position," Dean said. "Sammy's relationship is bringing attention you don't want, but taking him isn't solving the problem. It's making it bigger." "How do you figure?" "Because now Frank Sinatra is calling every federal agent he knows. The NYPD is asking questions. The media is starting to sniff around. In trying to reduce attention, you've increased it tenfold." Bumpy was silent for a moment. Then he said, "What are you proposing?" "Let me come talk to you, face to face, alone. We'll work something out that gets Sammy back and keeps you in control of Harlem." "You want to come to Harlem alone?" Bumpy sounded amused. "You understand I'm holding one of your friends hostage, right?" "I understand you're a businessman who made a calculated move to protect your interests," Dean said. "I respect that, but now we need to find a solution that works for everyone." Bumpy laughed. "You got some balls, Dean Martin. Fine, come to the Lenox Lounge. Tonight at midnight. Come alone. If I see anyone with you, Sammy pays the price." "Understood," Dean said. Frank grabbed Dean's arm after he hung up. "You can't go alone. That's suicide." "It's necessary," Dean said. "Bumpy's testing me. If I show up with backup, it proves I don't trust him, which means he can't trust me. Dean, this isn't some movie. Bumpy Johnson is dangerous." "I know," Dean said quietly, "but Sammy's life is worth the risk." At midnight, Dean Martin took a cab to Harlem. The driver, a black man in his 50s, looked nervous when Dean gave him the address of the Lenox Lounge. "You sure about this, mister? This ain't the kind of place white folks go, especially alone, especially at night." "I'm sure," Dean said. The driver shook his head, but drove. When they arrived at the Lenox Lounge, Dean paid and got out. The street was quiet but not empty. Men stood in doorways, watching. Dean walked directly to the entrance. The door was open before he could knock. A large man in a suit gestured inside. "Mr. Johnson is waiting." Dean followed him through the bar, past tables of men who watched his every move, to a back room. Bumpy Johnson sat behind at a desk, perfectly dressed as always. Across from him, slumped in a chair, was Sammy Davis Jr. Sammy looked exhausted but unharmed. When he saw Dean, his eye went wide with a mixture of relief and terror. "Dean, what are you doing here?" "Coming to get you," Dean said simply. He turned to Bumpy. "Mr. Johnson, thank you for agreeing to meet." Bumpy gestured to a chair. "Sit." Dean sat. Bumpy studied him for a long moment. "You came alone like I asked. That takes guts, or stupidity. Maybe both," Dean agreed. Bumpy smiled slightly. "So, you're here to negotiate for Sammy. What are you offering?" Dean leaned forward. "First, let's establish what we both want. You want to run Harlem without interference from the police or federal agents. You want to maintain respect in your community, and you want to make money without complications." Bumpy nodded. "That's accurate. Sammy dating May Britt threatens all of those things. It brings attention. It pisses off people on all sides. It makes you look weak if you don't respond. Also accurate, Bumpy said. So here's what I propose, Dean said. Sammy and May continue their relationship, but they keep it out of Harlem. No public appearances here, no statements to the press. They do their thing quietly. Bumpy raised an eyebrow. And I'm supposed to just accept that? In exchange, Dean continued, Sammy performs at the Apollo 4 times a year. Exclusive engagements. No other Harlem venues. You book him, you take the standard cut, and you get the prestige of having Sammy Davis Jr. as your exclusive Harlem act. Bumpy considered this. That doesn't solve the attention problem. Yes, it does, Dean argued. Right now, Sammy's disappearance is creating attention. When he resurfaces, the press will ask questions. But if he comes back and immediately announces a multi-year exclusive deal with you at the Apollo, the story becomes about business. About you being such a powerful promoter that you landed an exclusive with one of the biggest stars in the world. You look strong, not threatened. Bumpy was quiet for a long moment. Then he turned to Sammy. This acceptable to you? Sammy nodded quickly. Yes, Mr. Johnson, absolutely. And the white girl? Bumpy asked. You going to marry her? Probably, Sammy admitted. Then you do it quietly, Bumpy said. No big press conference, no pictures in Jet magazine. You marry her, you do it private, you keep it out of Harlem. That's the deal. Sammy glanced at Dean, who nodded slightly. Agreed, Sammy said. Bumpy turned back to Dean. And Frank Sinatra? You can control him? He stops making threats? He stops calling the FBI? Dean smiled. Frank does what Frank does, but I'll talk to him. Make him understand this is handled. Bumpy stood up and walked to the window. He looked out at Harlem's dark streets. You know what I respect about you, Dean Martin? You don't pretend to be something you're not. Frank Sinatra comes in here acting tough, trying to intimidate me with his mob connections. You come in respectful, acknowledging my position, offering solutions instead of threats. That's why I'm willing to deal with you. Dean stood as well. I grew up around men like you, Mr. Johnson. I learned early that respect gets you further than threats. Bumpy turned and extended his hand. We have a deal. Dean shook it. Thank you for being reasonable. Bumpy's grip was firm. Don't make me regret this. If Sammy violates the terms, if this blows up in my face, there won't be another negotiation. Understood, Dean said. Bumpy gestured to Sammy. Get him out of here. Take him back to Frank before Frank does something stupid. Dean and Sammy walked out of the Lenox Lounge together. On the street, Sammy grabbed Dean's arm. Dean, I can't believe you did that. I thought I was dead. You're not dead, Dean said. But you need to keep your end of the deal. No public appearances with May in Harlem. Keep the relationship quiet until after you're married. Can you do that? Yes, Sammy said. Absolutely. Good, Dean said. Now let's get you back to Frank before he has a heart attack. They took a cab back to the Waldorf. Frank was pacing the suite like a caged animal. When Sammy walked in, Frank grabbed him in a bear hug. Sammy, thank God. Are you okay? Did they hurt you? I'm fine, Sammy said. Dean worked it out. Frank looked at Dean in disbelief. Worked it out? How? Dean explained the deal. 4 exclusive Apollo shows a year. Keep the relationship with May quiet. No press conferences. Frank listened in growing amazement. You walked into Harlem alone and negotiated with Bumpy Johnson for Sammy's release? What if he'd just killed you both? He wasn't gonna kill us, Dean said. This was always about business. Bumpy needed to assert control. I gave him a way to do that without violence. Frank sat down heavily. Dean, that was either the bravest thing I've ever seen or the stupidest. I honestly can't tell which. Sammy spoke up. It was the bravest. Dean saved my life tonight, Frank. He walked into that room not knowing if he'd walk out, and he did it to save me. Dean shrugged. That's what friends do. The deal held. Sammy performed at the Apollo 4 times a year for the next several years. He married May Britt in November 1960 in a private ceremony. The press coverage was minimal, just as Bumpy had demanded. Sammy kept his relationship out of Harlem, and Bumpy kept his word about not interfering. Years later, after Bumpy Johnson died in 1968, Sammy was asked about his relationship with the notorious crime boss. Sammy's answer surprised everyone. Bumpy Johnson scared the hell out of me, but I respected him. He had rules. He had a code. And when Dean Martin negotiated that deal, Bumpy kept his word. In his own way, Bumpy was honorable. And Dean? Sammy smiled. Dean Martin walked into the lion's den to save me. No backup, no weapons, just courage and intelligence. I owe him my life. Frank Sinatra never fully understood what Dean had done that night. Frank operated through power and connections. Dean operated through empathy and negotiation. Frank would have gone to war. Dean prevented the war. In his autobiography, published in 1989, Sammy devoted an entire chapter to the night Dean saved him from Bumpy Johnson. He wrote, Dean Martin is remembered as the king of cool, the laid-back entertainer who made everything look effortless. But the night he walked into Harlem alone to negotiate with Bumpy Johnson revealed who Dean really was beneath the cool exterior. He was brave. He was brilliant. He understood people in a way most of us never will. He saw that Bumpy wasn't a monster, just a man protecting his interests. And he found a solution that saved my life while allowing Bumpy to maintain his dignity. That takes more than courage. That takes wisdom. The story of Dean Martin's midnight negotiation in Harlem became legendary among the Rat Pack. It was proof that Dean, the man who seemed to care about nothing, actually cared deeply about his friends. That beneath the drunk persona and the casual charm was someone who'd risk everything for the people he loved. When Dean Martin died in 1995, Sammy had been gone for 5 years, but Sammy's children attended Dean's funeral, and they brought a letter Sammy had written years earlier to be delivered to Dean upon his death. The letter said simply, Dean, thank you for walking into the darkness to bring me home. You were the bravest man I ever knew. I love you. Your grateful friend, Sammy. That letter captured the essence of Dean Martin's legacy, not the songs or the movies or the fame, but the quiet acts of courage, the moments when he walked into danger to save his friends, the times when he chose compassion over caution, negotiation over violence, understanding over judgment. Dean Martin walked into Harlem alone and did the unthinkable. He made Bumpy Johnson see reason, and in doing so, he saved Sammy Davis Jr.'s life.